Good afternoon. I would like to talk to you today about my recent project with the PRCA titled Knowledge of the PR Industry and its Execution. So first I'd just like to give you a brief overview of the project. So in it I discussed a variety of different topics. As you can see they're listed on the screen here. So we have the various media landscapes PR professionals must work with. So these are things such as social media, publications, working with the press, journals, all these different types of media landscapes that PR professionals utilise in order to benefit their clients. Following on from that, it would be management of relationships in a work environment. So these can be internal or external relationships. So internal relationships would be how you communicate with your colleagues. External could be how you communicate with your clients, how you communicate with your clients' customers, how you communicate with the press, all these different types. And then following on, we have the advantages and disadvantages to technological developments in the media. So these could be things such as development of tools like Google Analytics, Mailing Manager, all these different developments that have come within the media and how PR professionals utilise these. And finally, we have the use of the written word for PR. Different types of written word communications include press releases, journals, articles, product reviews, application notes, white papers, all these different types. And it's useful for a PR professional to understand when to use them and how to use them. So as you'll see in front of you, you have a little handbook, which I will refer to as we go through. So I'd like to talk to you about 3 different topic areas that I found interesting in the project. And the first one you'll see on the screen is understanding PR. So the first page of your booklet has a few key words that I came across when researching definitions for PR. So as you can see on the page, we have a variety of different words: communicate, strategic, publics, stakeholders, persuade, management, reputation, manipulate, propaganda, media relations, influence, spin, image, publicity, and inform. Now these are a whole variety of different words, but they cropped up quite a lot when I was looking at definitions, and I found that it would be useful to look at all these different words, especially an aspect of the whole of the presentation, and just see what comes up in general when looking at the knowledge of PR. Now, for me, I would have to say that I would choose a few of these key specific words, and I would select persuade, management, reputation, and media relations as being my 4 key ones when I think about PR. And hopefully as we go through the presentation, you'll understand why I've chosen these words and it will become clear. So, on your next page, for the next point on the presentation, are definitions of public relations. So in my project, I looked at these 3 specific definitions and discussed why I felt that they were either good definitions or bad definitions. Now, the list on here is CIPR, and they define public relations as it's all about reputation, the result of what you do, what you say, and what others say about you. Then we have the PRSA, who say public relations is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organisations and their publics. And finally, we have Trevor Morris and Simon Goldsworthy's definition from PR, a persuasive industry, which suggests PR is about persuading people to behave in ways that support your own objectives. It works primarily through media relations and other forms of third-party endorsement. Now, what I would suggest from my research and looking at PR and the different definitions involved would be to combine the definition 1 and definition 2. Whilst I agree with CIPR, I would have to suggest that the first part of it, the result of what you do and what you say, are hard to control. This is in relation to your client. You can't control what your client will say all the time. However, you do have a part to play in what others say about your client. And I feel like this is key when understanding PR. And finally, the third definition, persuading people. This ties in with what others say about you. Working primarily through media relations and other forms of third-party endorsements, your role as a PR professional is to encourage positive communications, whether that be in the media, with your customers' clients, On a whole, it's just about generating this reputation for your client. Now, the definition of PR has never been constant, and it's hard to almost pin down an exact definition for the subject. However, by looking through the development of PR throughout history, we can see where certain keywords, like we looked at on page 1, tend to crop up. Now, as you'll see on your next page, and the third point on the board, it would be looking at PR throughout history. Now, I'm only going to give you a brief recap compared to what I talked about in the project, but I specifically looked at the use of PR and how it's been termed in the past with propaganda, and that idea on the first page of spin and manipulation. So if we look at, in particular, the use of propaganda and, for example, PR in the war efforts in World War I and World War II, we can see where the idea of manipulation and spin comes from. So in particular, the American government felt huge devastation due to the war and used a lot of propaganda in order to rally troops and to rally audiences and the community to ensure that they understood why the government had taken part in this war and what they were doing. Now, one of the famous ones, as you'll see on your page, is Uncle Sam's "I Want You" for the US Army. Now, while the term public relations wasn't used until the 1930s, it tends to crop up in a lot of blogs and articles and publications as to why there's been this idea of propaganda come in and how it's transformed from that and developed through history to become public relations. I mean, the American government created the Espionage Act, which ensured that no publication, no journalist, no film, no radio, no TV could say anything that didn't go through the American government, to ensure that everything that was being said about the war was positive in the American public's eyes. And this wasn't just contained in America, it was also used in Britain. So if you turn over to your next 2 pages, you'll see examples of British posters where propaganda was used in Britain. And actually, similar to the Espionage Act, there was the Wellington House Organisation, which ensured that it basically hired journalists and writers to only produce propaganda content. So every film, every radio, every TV, all the content that was produced by the Wellington House Organisation solely from journalists for the use of propaganda. And we can see it develop so much throughout history on the fact that even Churchill was renowned for his use of fake news. And if we tie this into my next point coming up, which is about the media and the landscape in itself, you can see how the development from that has grown. So Churchill used broadcasts and different TV channels in order to use a form of content that PR professionals use today, which are press releases. And you can see that as the development of PR has gone through history, the definition has never been constant and it has always changed because of this. And I also think a big reason is because of the development within the media landscape. So on this point, you can see one of my topics in my project was the development of the internet and the spread of social media. Now, as you'll see on the board, according to the Higher Apprenticeship, the media landscape in the UK is one of the largest and most complex in the world. If you turn to your next page in the booklet, I've taken a short infographic about the history of the media landscape. And from that definition of it being one of the largest and most complex, a study by Higher Apprenticeship a few years ago revealed that the UK has over 815 radio channels, 521 TV channels, 1,594 newspapers, 1,969 magazines, and from this infographic we can see how it's developed through history. So we start at 1844, where the first telegraph has been sent, which the person on here is a resemblance of social media messaging. And then we take a huge jump to 1997, where the start of social sites start to come in, with 6 Degrees having a peak of 1 million members. Then we move to 2004, where Facebook begins. And you'll see on the next page then, we moved to 2010 with Twitter, and with 65 million tweets a day being sent out. 2011 to the launch of Snapchat, And finally, we catch up in 2018 with the use of VR, virtual reality, and fake news. Now we can see here that there's been a vast development in the condition of moving from radio, television, and newspapers that we used previously to more social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, all these different types, and the way that also news is being presented to the public. So traditionally, if you wanted to hear about a news story, you'd watch the ITV News or the BBC News and the TV at 10 o'clock, or you'd read the newspaper, or you'd you'd listen to the radio on your drive to work. But now it's as easily as downloading an app on your phone to get the BBC News updates, and BBC even also have a short clip on their app which says, in a hurry, all you need to know in less than 5 minutes. And it really shows the development of this spread of social media and the development of the media landscape. And now there are a range of advantages and disadvantages to this. A lot of advantages to a PR professional when speaking to the social media for their client. You can look at the fact that content is generated much quicker and you can share it much quicker. So say you have a client that specialises in the pharmaceutical market and they want to write a blog about the impact of Brexit on the pharmaceutical industry. Now they could, as we know, Brexit has been an ongoing discussion, and from where it started a few years ago, it's nowhere near the same anymore. And I think it's important that from this, clients and businesses are able to share their views at the time, but also update these. So your client could write a blog on the pharmaceutical industry and the impact of Brexit, and a few months or a year later, they could update that blog. And then they're also able to share this with their followers by recognising and tweeting something, say, did you hear about our previous blog? We'll read here for some of the updates as the situation continues and as the events change. So it's about being able to be quicker by sharing things and also easily accessible as well. So news is more accessible, which means businesses have to stay up to date with these trends. PR professionals have to stay up to date with these trends. And that's what the media landscape allows us to do as it develops. And as we've talked about with sharing, the benefit to this media landscape is the fact that by sharing something, it can be shared across the whole globe. You're reaching a higher target audience by being able to share things so easily. And then that comes into other tools we mentioned earlier, such as Google Analytics. As a PR professional, you're able to show your client how your social media campaign for them has benefited their business by a higher visit of websites, a higher click on Twitter and Facebook, all these different types. However, with it, it also comes with a few disadvantages. So that whole point about being able to share things and it spreads so quickly can be a disadvantage as well. As we talked about earlier, when you can't control what your clients say a bad tweet goes out, you can't control that. Even if someone deletes it, it's on the web forever. There's no way to contain it. If you take it down, can guarantee someone has probably already taken a picture of it. And that's almost a negative connotation with social media. And within that, then it also comes into privacy issues and the fact that obviously if you're creating a social media campaign and your client is sharing on both Twitter and LinkedIn, they have different character counts. So how can you get the same message across that you're sharing on LinkedIn on Twitter in 120 characters or less? And that can be quite a disadvantage for some businesses. However, the outcome to all this, I would have to suggest that when planned and managed well, I feel like the media landscape can have a huge benefit for a PR professional and for their clients that they represent. There's a huge array of media platforms out there for us, and I feel like the social media aspect side of it and the internet is only one small part of this big media landscape. But what we've seen is as news has become easily shared and as people are so accessible with it all by the use of iPhones and screens, it's much better for a client to be on that basis and to be sharing things to build up that bigger revenue and to build up that bigger audience. However, we do have to be careful with what we write, which is why planning and managing it through PR professionals is key. And that brings me on to my final point of the presentation, which is the use of the written word. So if you go past your social media infographic, you will see different examples on here. But first I'd like to talk to you about the specific different types of written communications that PR professionals can utilise. So we have different ones from journalistic, so press releases, newsletters, articles, features. Then we move to technical ones, so more things like white papers, project reviews, application notes. Then we move to the media side, which could be social media, podcasts, all these different types of campaigns. And then marketing, so posters, webinars, things like that. But it's important for PR professionals to know when to use these different writing styles. So to use an example of myself from working at the Scott Partnership, say we have a client that wants to release a new product, we would suggest a press release. So a press release would go out to the media, which explain this new product, when it was announced, when it will be distributed, how clients can get hold of it, how people can speak to the customers, things such as that. And then say they wanted to develop this further, it perhaps would go to a white paper. This would be a technical white paper and would be a technical piece of content that was solely about the product and about the use of the product to benefit the research and the sector that it's in. There might be a few examples of it being used, graphs, diagrams, but it is solely promotional with your client's name all over it and fully branded. And then say they want a bit more, and it relates back to our definitions earlier, what others say about you. They want to kind of have a bit of outside influence. So while a white paper is great, because it's promotional, you'd only really use it as a piece of marketing material. So say an event or to give customers. Whereas a feature article is more, it generates more about what others are saying about you. This could be a piece of research done by a researcher with the product and shows the research specifically and how it's benefiting it, but the client's name won't be mentioned, and 9 times out of 10 the product is hardly mentioned as well. It's solely non-promotional in the best way that also benefits your client. And obviously we've talked here, I've almost given you a bit of a timeline, a bit of a direction of how those different styles would be used, but it's important to ensure that you realise the impact of these for a business. So that's where the booklet comes into play. So as you'll see on your piece of paper, I have an example here from a KFC. Now I'm not sure if you're aware, but I think it was a few years ago now, KFC ran out of chicken. And there was a huge uproar about the fact that KFC had run out of chicken. And out of all the different types of campaigns to set up, KFC released this poster where they reworded the logo to spell FCK and issued an apology underneath saying, a chicken restaurant without any chicken, it's not ideal. Now, this was just a simple form of apology. There were no emails, there wasn't a big report. It was just almost an instant communication and a way for that business to get out their apology as quickly as possible, and in order for it to be shared around the world as quickly as possible. So obviously it was picked up on social media and audiences loved it. They thought it was a bit brazen, but that it worked really well. And it was shared all over, and a lot of people got a lot of different laughs from it, and it was even featured on the BBC News. Now, this is an example of a good impact. However, it's also an example of a choice of when to use this style. So because obviously it wasn't, no offense to it, but it wasn't a great political impact or a great huge impact, the fact that KFC ran out of some chicken, it was going to be restored. And because they knew that it wasn't such a serious offence, they could share it so easily and in such a humorous way. Now compared, if you'd like to go to the next page, we have Adidas's email to the runners of the Boston Marathon, and the title of the email said, "Congrats, you survived the Boston Marathon." Now in any other context, this might have been an okay email tagline. No one enjoys a marathon, and and perhaps it would have been a funny way to inform customers about it and congratulate them. However, due to the context of the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, it did not go down very well with the audience and with the media. And as you can see below, we have an example of just how quickly, from what we were talking about earlier, news can be shared. And then and a mistake can be generated across the whole. So as you see from just one example here, a guy tweeted about their email and it was shared 119 times and liked 357 times. Now this is just your average daily Joe. This is anybody that's just tweeted that and it's been shared that many times. So imagine what it was when other people and influencers got involved. Now the email itself it just almost top and turned, and it just kind of got worse and worse as the situation went along. And and Adidas did own up to it and did apologise, but the damage was done. And in this instance, it shows the impact of standards for a business. So in my opinion, I don't believe that email was thoroughly checked by enough people to ensure that surely someone would have pointed out the context of this, and this can be a problem. And this is why it's so necessary for PR professionals to have specific standards put in place and specific procedures to ensure that all content is proofread and checked. Because at the end of the day, as a PR professional, we've talked about how you're managing your client's reputation and you're putting out good communications. However, if someone sees this, whoever wrote that email, they aren't going to see it as, say, oh, their marketing department or their PR department wrote this, they're rubbish. They're going to see it as Adidas shared this, they're rubbish. And that's why it's important as a PR professional to understand the impact of these things. Now, hopefully as a whole, throughout the presentation, you've seen how these three different areas tie in together and tie in overall to the knowledge of the PR industry. But I think it's important to just have a quick recap. So on your final page, you'll see some of the words from the beginning and why they were chosen. And I think, as you'll see throughout the presentation, they have appeared quite a lot. So we have different ones on there. But looking at the points on the board, what is PR? I think we can agree, and as you'll see on the sheet, PR is predominantly about managing and promoting a positive reputation for clients, whether that be through media relations, crisis management, social media campaigns, all these different types. It's about managing and promoting your client to the highest ability and the highest standard. Now, how does the media come into this? Well, in today's age, content moves so quickly that it's important that PR professionals utilise all these different types of media platforms and the media landscape as a whole. As society becomes so multi-screen, it's vital that PR professionals and businesses keep up to date with these developments and these challenges and utilise tools such as Google Analytics or Mailing Manager. And finally, why are written communications so important? Well, I think the last slide demonstrated that enough, but as we talked about, it's all about promoting an image and managing the reputation of your client. And written communications are so important for this. You have to ensure that there are specific procedures in place to make sure that things are proofread and whatever goes out for your client is correct and is honest and is truthful, because at the end of the day, the way things come around and the way things are shared so easily, it's vital that everything that you put out there for your client is right and is correct. And I feel like that's something paramount to the definition of PR in general, and to understand the knowledge of the industry, that whilst it is about planning and maintaining and managing these relationships, it's ensuring that you understand the ethics and the background to all these different types of information. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.